Have you ever noticed how the moment you start growing, the moment you start healing, the moment you start honoring yourself, some people suddenly change toward you? They get quieter, colder, distant. Their tone shifts. Their energy shifts. Their support turns into silence, and their silence turns into tension. And you find yourself wondering, what did I do wrong? Why do they suddenly hate me? But hear me, when people suddenly start acting different, it's rarely because you became worse. It's usually because you became better. Some people were comfortable with you as long as you stayed the version of yourself that needed them, the version that apologized too quickly, doubted too easily, and settled too often. They were fine with you as long as your confidence was low, your voice was quiet, and your standards were flexible. But the moment you start stepping into your identity, the moment you start realizing your worth, the moment you start walking with a different level of clarity, they don't know how to handle the new you, because the new you exposes the parts of them that never changed. You're not being hated. You're disrupting the agreements they built with your old self. People don't get uncomfortable because you've done something wrong. They get uncomfortable because your evolution forces them to confront their stagnation. Your growth becomes a mirror. Your healing becomes a spotlight. Your confidence becomes a reminder. And not everyone wants to see their truth reflected back at them through your transformation. Instead of rising with you, they retreat from you. Some people never loved you. They loved your silence. They loved the version of you who didn't set boundaries. They loved the version of you who accepted neglect disguised as love. They loved the version of you who bent over backward to keep them. When you outgrow those patterns, they label you as arrogant, distant, difficult, ungrateful. But what they call arrogance is simply self-respect. What they call distance is simply peace. What they call ungrateful is simply you no longer accepting emotional crumbs. And sometimes it's not even about your strength, it's about your light. Not everyone can handle a bright soul. Your spirit irritates the demons they refuse to confront. Your joy reminds them of the happiness they abandoned. Your success reminds them of the dreams they gave up on. People will project hatred when what they really feel is fear. Fear that you are outgrowing them. Fear that they can no longer control the emotional version of you they benefited from. Fear that they can no longer reach you where you're headed. Understand this. Your transformation will threaten the unhealed parts of others. Your boundaries will reveal the selfishness they hid well. Your progress will expose the excuses they built their lives on. Your confidence will highlight the insecurity they never dealt with. And when people feel exposed, they react, not because you changed into someone worse, but because you evolved into someone their comfort zone cannot contain. Sometimes life removes people quietly because their energy cannot follow you where you're going. Sometimes connections fall apart, not because of conflict, but because your growth created a distance their unwillingness to grow cannot cross. And sometimes people start hating you because loving you requires effort, accountability, and honesty. Things they don't want to give. So the next time someone shifts suddenly, stop asking, what's wrong with me? Start asking, what is my growth revealing? Stop shrinking yourself to fit into relationships that depend on your smallness. Stop dimming your light for people who feel safer in darkness. Stop apologizing for the healing that saved you, the growth that elevated you, and the inner strength that brought you out of places you once thought you'd never escape. When people suddenly start hating you, it is often life's way of clearing your path. It is the universe relocating those who cannot walk with you into the next season. It is separation disguised as hostility, protection disguised as distance, alignment disguised as conflict. And the moment you stop internalizing their reactions as your responsibility is the moment you reclaim your power. People don't hate you because you fell. They hate you because you got back up. People don't hate you because you're lost. They hate you because you found your way. People don't hate you because you changed. They hate you because you refuse to stay the version of yourself that made them comfortable. Their reaction is not your downfall, it is your confirmation. When people who once embraced you suddenly grow uncomfortable in your presence, it can feel confusing, even painful. But their discomfort is rarely rooted in anything you did wrong. More often, it's a reflection of the growth happening inside you. Growth you may not even fully recognize yet. People respond not just to who you are, but to the energy, confidence, clarity, and courage you begin to carry when you start evolving. When you stretch beyond old limits, you disrupt the unspoken agreements that once kept everyone comfortable. And comfort for many is a fragile thing. Growth, by its very nature, exposes what has remained unchanged. When you begin speaking with more certainty, those who were used to your silence feel unsettled. When you start setting boundaries, those who benefited from your lack of them suddenly interpret your clarity as hostility. When you heal, you no longer participate in patterns that once made other people feel powerful or important. And when you rise, people who chose to stay where they were begin seeing their own stagnation reflected back at them like a mirror they never asked to look into. You see, growth is not loud. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or fireworks. It shows up quietly in your choices, your behavior, the people you choose to keep close, the conversations you no longer entertain. But while growth may be quiet, it is impossible to hide. It radiates through you. And even if you try to remain the same, the shift inside you will still disrupt the comfort of those who benefited from your old patterns. Some people grow uncomfortable because your new level demands that they also rise. But rising requires self-reflection, discipline, humility, and the willingness to confront personal weaknesses. Not everyone is ready for that. For some, it's easier to blame you than to ask themselves hard questions. It's easier to resent your progress than to face their own procrastination. It's easier to call you change than to admit they stayed the same. There are people who liked you better when you doubted yourself because your doubt made them feel secure. They preferred you unsure because your uncertainty made room for their control. They were comfortable when you played small because your smallness cast no shadow on their insecurities. But when you grow, you expand. And your expansion naturally exposes what in others has remained tight, restricted, and undeveloped. Your confidence becomes a spotlight. Your boundaries become a truth serum. Your courage becomes a contrast. Your healing becomes a silent confrontation. And even without saying a word, your transformation can make others feel like they are shrinking. This is not your fault. It is not your burden. It is simply the nature of growth. Some people feel discomfort because they had a version of you in mind, one that was easier to predict, easier to influence, easier to keep beneath them. But when you evolve, that old version disappears. And instead of adapting to your growth, they attempt to pull you back into the shape that made sense to them. Not because they dislike your new strength, but because they never built the muscle to meet you there. They want the benefits of proximity without the responsibility of evolution. Others feel discomfort because your growth forces them to confront the stories they told themselves. Stories like, we're all struggling, none of us are ready, no one in this group dreams too big, or we're all staying right here where it's familiar. When you start breaking out of the mold, you break the narrative. And not everyone welcomes that break. Your growth becomes a reminder of what they could have done, should have done, or still could do. But instead of seeing possibility, some choose to see threat. Understand this. People respond to growth based on the condition of their own hearts. The same growth that inspires one person can intimidate another. The same growth that awakens someone can offend someone else. The same growth that makes one person want to rise can make another person retreat. Their discomfort does not reflect your value. It reflects their readiness. And sometimes the discomfort you see is simply grief. They're grieving the old version of you, the one that made them feel needed, superior, validated, or safe. They're grieving their inability to keep up. They're grieving the fact that you now move in a direction they may never choose to walk. They're grieving the loss of familiarity. People's discomfort reveals their relationship with their own growth far more than it reveals anything about you. When you understand this, you no longer internalize their reactions. You no longer shrink to soothe their insecurities. You no longer apologize for your evolution. You recognize that your growth is not an attack. It's an invitation, one that not everyone is willing to accept. There comes a moment in your life when healing changes you so deeply that the people who once understood you suddenly act like you're speaking a different language, not because you become someone harsh, distant, or unrecognizable, but because healing alters the patterns they were once comfortable with. The healed version of you no longer apologizes for existing. The healed version of you no longer bends until you break just to keep peace. The healed version of you no longer tolerates what wounds your spirit. And some people simply cannot handle that shift because they were more connected to your brokenness than to your wholeness. There are individuals who grew accustomed to the version of you who swallowed pain in silence, who avoided conflict, who allowed disrespect to pass because you didn't believe you deserved better. They built their relationship with you around your wounds, your insecurity, your self-doubt, your fear of being abandoned. When you heal, you break the unspoken agreements that kept those dynamics alive. You stop playing roles that were never meant for you. You stop performing emotional labor that drained you. You stop accepting bare minimum effort from people who were used to you pouring out everything. And for some, that's the moment they start calling you change, difficult, or different, when really you just became whole. Healing teaches you how to love yourself in ways you once begged others to. It teaches you how to speak up, how to honor your needs, how to walk away from what steals your peace, how to choose yourself without guilt. But not everyone who walked with you through your pain is ready to walk with you through your power. They were comfortable when you needed them more than they needed you. They were comfortable when you tolerated their excuses, their inconsistency, their broken promises. Your healed boundaries disrupt that comfort. Your healed clarity exposes their behaviors. Your healed self-worth forces them to meet you with respect rather than complacency. The healed version of you is no longer accessible to people who fed on the fragments of your self-esteem. Some relationships were built on your willingness to settle. Some connections survive because you lack the strength to release them. Healing gives you that strength, and in return, those relationships may crumble, not because you failed them, but because you outgrew what kept you wounded. Healing also changes your energy. You no longer carry desperation, you carry discernment. You no longer crave validation, you carry assurance. You no longer fear being alone, you carry inner peace. This shift in energy can be unsettling to people who once felt superior, needed, or in control. They don't know how to engage with someone who sees clearly now, someone who recognizes manipulation, someone who can identify emotional imbalance, someone who no longer participates in toxic cycles just to keep someone close. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the mirror your healing holds up to them. There are people who only knew how to connect with you through shared hurt, shared trauma, or shared dysfunction. When you step out of that space, you step out of the emotional environment that kept those bonds alive. Your evolution breaks the emotional contracts that once held you together. Healing forces them to confront the part of themselves that refuses to grow, and not everyone is ready to confront that truth. It's easier to say you've changed than to admit they've stayed the same. It's easier to distance themselves than to rise with you. And there is a quieter reality. Healing requires you to grieve who you used to be. But others must grieve that version too. The version of you who never said no. The version of you who tolerated chaos. The version of you who needed saving. The version of you who made others feel important by diminishing yourself. When that version disappears, they lose the version of you that served their comfort. And people do not let go of comfort willingly. Not everyone can celebrate a healed heart, because a healed heart sees truth. A healed heart no longer entertains what harms it. A healed heart recognizes the difference between love and attachment, between support and dependency, between effort and excuses. And this awareness forces relationships, friendships, and connections to either rise to meet your new level or fall away. Your healing is not a threat. Your healing is not arrogance. Your healing is not abandonment. It is simply the return to who you were always meant to be. But the truth is simple. Not everyone can handle the version of you that no longer hurts where it used to, that no longer breaks where it used to, that no longer bleeds for people who refuse to stop cutting you. There is a quiet moment in everyone's life when you raise your standards, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of finally understanding your own worth. And the moment you do, something shifts. People who once seemed loyal begin drifting. Individuals who claim to care suddenly become distant. The ones who praised you when you expected nothing from them start criticizing you now that you expect respect, effort, and honesty. That shift isn't a coincidence. It's clarity. Your standards reveal who was only there because it was convenient for them, not because they were committed to you. Convenience attracts a crowd, but standards attract truth. When you had no boundaries, when you accepted crumbs, when you prioritized others while neglecting yourself, it was easy for people to stay. You made everything comfortable for them. You made time even when you were exhausted. You said yes even when it drained you. You tolerated behaviors that chipped away at your spirit because you didn't want to lose anyone. You were accessible, available, forgiving, understanding, sometimes to your own detriment. People benefited from your self-abandonment, even if they never said it out loud. But when you begin to love yourself enough to say, this is what I deserve, the landscape changes. Suddenly, the ones who were there for what you provided, not who you were, feel threatened. They're not upset that you raised your standards. They're upset that your higher standards expose their lower effort. They're not angry about your boundaries. They're angry that your boundaries now hold them accountable. They're not bothered by your growth. They're bothered by the fact that your growth demands they grow too. And growth requires responsibility, consistency, and intention. Things convenience-based people never plan to offer. When you raise your standards, you remove discounts to your spirit. You stop allowing last-minute apologies to erase repeat disappointments. You stop giving unlimited chances to people who show you the same disrespect in different forms. You stop believing words that aren't backed by actions. You start recognizing patterns instead of accepting promises. And for those who were only there to take, to drain, to receive without giving, your evolution becomes a threat to their comfort. Some people were only in your life because you required so little of them. They weren't afraid of losing you because you never asked them to show up fully. You never asked them to communicate clearly, to be consistent, to honor their word, to match the effort you were giving. The moment you start requiring these things, their true intentions are revealed. Someone who is genuine will rise with you. Someone who is using you will retreat. And that retreat is your revelation. Your standards act like a filter. They sift the genuine from the opportunistic, the committed from the casual, the invested from the convenience seekers. People who value you will appreciate your standards because they reflect self-respect. People who were exploiting your kindness will resent your standards because they eliminate the easy access they once enjoyed. And you will begin to notice how quickly someone disappears when they realize they can no longer benefit from your silence or your self-sacrifice. Raising your standards doesn't mean you think you're better than anyone. It means you finally understand that your time, your energy, your heart, your peace, these things are sacred. They are not to be handed to people who treat them carelessly. Standards are not walls, they are filters. They keep your life aligned with people who value what you bring and remove those who only stayed because the cost was low. When you start expecting effort, convenience-based people will call you demanding. When you start expecting honesty, they will call you difficult. When you start expecting consistency, they will call you unrealistic. But these labels are not reflections of you. They are confessions of their unwillingness to grow. They want you easy, predictable, unquestioning, endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving. Your standards disrupt that dynamic, and in their disruption, truth is exposed. You will notice that the people who are meant for you will not be intimidated by your standards. They will appreciate the clarity. They will honor your boundaries. They will meet you with the same respect and effort you offer them. These people were never there for convenience. They were there for connection. And connection survives what convenience cannot. Your standards do more than protect you. They reveal you. They reveal who truly values you. They reveal who was only present because your lack of standards made you easier to access. And they reveal who is willing to walk beside you in the direction of your growth, rather than only standing beside you when it was easy, comfortable, or personally beneficial to them. Jealousy is a complicated emotion, one that rarely announces itself honestly. It doesn't walk into the room and say, I admire you, but I'm struggling with what your success makes me feel. Instead, it hides behind subtle comments, quiet distance, or sudden criticism. Yet beneath that surface lies a truth many people never admit. Jealousy often begins as admiration. It starts as inspiration, as respect, as awe. But somewhere along the way, admiration becomes twisted by insecurity, comparison, and internal conflict, turning something beautiful into something bitter. There are people who genuinely admire your strength, your resilience, your confidence, your growth, and the way you carry yourself through challenges. They see qualities in you that they wish they could find in themselves. They see your courage and feel the weight of their own hesitation. They see your progress and feel the heaviness of their own stagnation. They see your light and feel the shadows of their own unrealized potential. That admiration is real, but admiration demands humility. It requires a person to celebrate another's success without questioning their own worth. Not everyone knows how to hold that posture. Jealousy begins when admiration collides with insecurity. When someone looks at your journey and starts asking, why them? Why not me? It isn't that they want you to lose. It's that they feel like they're not winning. Your achievements become a reflection of their fears. Your confidence becomes a reminder of their doubts. Your growth becomes a spotlight on the areas of their life they have avoided. Instead of saying, I'm inspired, they say, I'm threatened, because they don't know how to separate your rise from their feelings of inadequacy. There are individuals who cheered for you until your progress surpassed their comfort. When your success was small, it inspired them. When your success grew larger, it confronted them. They loved the version of you who stayed within familiar limits. But the moment you expanded beyond those limits, it challenged their internal narrative. They begin comparing instead of celebrating, critiquing instead of learning, resenting instead of rising. This shift is rarely about you. It's about the internal battle happening inside them. Jealousy is admiration that lost its way because it carries within it the residue of, I wish that were me. It's a longing disguised as criticism. It's a personal dream reflected in someone else's reality. It's the quiet ache of watching someone achieve what you've convinced yourself is out of reach. But instead of using your achievements as motivation, some people turn them into emotional weapons against themselves and then project that discomfort outward. Jealousy often shows up in subtle ways. A compliment that feels backhanded, a sudden withdrawal when something good happens for you, a friend who becomes strangely silent during your victories. People who used to celebrate you with genuine excitement may now offer lukewarm support or uncomfortable smiles. They're torn because a part of them still admires you deeply, but another part cannot handle what that admiration makes them feel about themselves. It's easier to distance themselves from you than to face the mirror you unknowingly hold up to them. Sometimes jealousy shows up as criticism. They'll say you got lucky or changed or think you're better. They'll minimize your effort or question your intentions. But beneath those words is an internal unrest, a feeling of being left behind, a struggle to accept that your elevation does not diminish their worth. They don't dislike you. They dislike the way your life contrasts with the story they've been telling themselves about their own. And yet, if you look closely, you'll notice something important. Jealous people rarely distance themselves from those they feel nothing toward. Jealousy is proof that something in you reflects something meaningful in them, something they want, something they admire, something they once dreamed of but never pursued. Their jealousy is not born from your existence. It is born from their hesitation to become the version of themselves they see reflected in you. At its core, jealousy is admiration that forgot how to stay pure. It is admiration that became tangled in fear. It is admiration that now punishes instead of praises. And though it may hurt when people you care about shift in this way, understanding the root can help you navigate it with clarity rather than internalizing it as personal failure. Rejection is one of those experiences that can shake you to your core. It can make you question your worth, your ability, your direction, and even your identity. When someone turns away, when an opportunity slips through your hands, when a door you prayed for slams shut, it can feel like failure. It can feel like loss. It can feel like punishment. But so often, rejection is not the universe denying you, it's the universe redirecting you. What feels like an ending is frequently the beginning of something aligned, something necessary, something you couldn't see because you were too close to what you wanted or too afraid to let it go. Rejection has a way of clearing paths you were never meant to walk. It removes what was temporary, unstable, or unworthy of your potential. But when you're in the middle of the hurt, it's hard to see that truth. You replay the conversation, the breakup, the denial. You imagine how things could have gone differently. You wonder what you lacked or what you did wrong. Yet the deeper reality is that rejection often protects you from settling. It keeps you from attaching to what cannot hold your destiny. It prevents you from forcing yourself into spaces that would drain you instead of developing you. There are moments when you are so determined to hold on to someone or something that you don't notice how small it makes you. You don't notice the compromise. You don't notice how your spirit tightens itself to fit into places that were never meant to sustain the fullness of who you are becoming. But rejection forces expansion. It pushes you out of what is too small for your purpose. It frees you from environments that would eventually limit your growth. It releases you from attachments that were never equipped to carry your calling. Rejection is often a sign that something ahead requires your presence more than what you are leaving behind. That job that didn't call you back might have kept you stressed, stagnant, or unseen. That relationship that ended might have been blocking you from experiencing love that honors your heart instead of draining it. That opportunity you lost might have been too limited to hold the magnitude of your potential. The closed door is not the story, it's a chapter. And chapters shift because you are meant to turn the page. What you call rejection is often preparation. It teaches resilience. It strengthens your discernment. It sharpens your intuition. It forces you to revisit who you are and what you believe you deserve. It reveals how deeply you depend on external validation and pushes you toward internal grounding. Rejection wakes you up to your own value. It forces you to stop begging for what should be freely given. It reminds you that you cannot build your future around people or opportunities that require you to shrink. Many times you're not rejected because you're unworthy.
You're rejected because you're being aligned.
There are seasons where life says no because something larger is waiting to say yes.
You may not recognize it immediately. You may even resist the shift.
But with time, clarity comes. You look back and realize that the rejection that felt like destruction was actually direction. It was clearing emotional space, mental space, spiritual space for something more meaningful. The people who left made room for people who can stay. The opportunities you lost made room for ones that match your gifts. The places you were denied entry to make room for places where your presence will be valued. Rejection is not a dead end, it's a detour. And detours are not punishments, they are protection. They reroute you from dangers you cannot see. They steer you away from connections that are temporary. They guide you toward places where your growth can continue instead of being stunted. A detour may frustrate you, but it never abandons you. It simply says, this is not the way.
Try again. Go forward. There's something better ahead.
Sometimes the universe removes you before you sabotage yourself by staying. Sometimes it breaks what you're holding because what you're holding is too small. Sometimes it has to disappoint your plans to fulfill your purpose. It doesn't make the pain less real, but it does make the pain less final. Rejection redirects you toward alignment, toward authenticity, toward relationships that honor you, toward opportunities that elevate you, toward environments that can carry the weight of who you are becoming. There is a voice inside you that speaks long before anyone else does. It speaks in the quiet moments, in the places no one sees, in the thoughts you entertain when you're alone. Voice shapes your confidence, your decisions, your courage, and your belief in what's possible for your life. Your inner dialogue is not background noise, it is the architect of your destiny. It determines how high you climb, how far you go, and how boldly you show up. Because no matter what the world says about you, the loudest opinion is always the one you whisper to yourself. Your inner dialogue is the lens through which you interpret everything that happens around you. Two people can face the same situation. One sees opportunity, the other sees danger. One sees potential, the other sees failure. One sees a challenge worth fighting for, the other sees a reason to quit. The difference isn't the situation. It's the conversation happening inside. When your inner dialogue is rooted in fear, you shrink yourself before the world ever has the chance to test you. But when your inner dialogue is grounded in belief, you rise with a resilience that circumstances cannot break. Every time you tell yourself you're not enough, not ready, not worthy, or not capable, you are building barriers in your own mind. You begin to talk yourself out of the very opportunities designed to stretch you. You silence your own potential before you give it the chance to breathe. You sabotage the paths that could have led to your breakthrough. The world doesn't have to limit you because your inner dialogue already did. But the opposite is also true. When you speak to yourself with intention, with encouragement, with clarity, you begin creating mental pathways that open doors instead of closing them. You start seeing solutions where you once saw problems. You start recognizing your strength where you once recognized only your fear. Your inner dialogue determines the risks you take. It determines whether you apply for the job, start the business, walk away from what hurts you, or step into spaces that intimidate you. It determines whether you allow yourself to be loved, whether you believe you deserve peace, and whether you trust your own intuition. When your inner dialogue is rooted in self-doubt, you will settle for less than your potential. You will stay in relationships that drain you, jobs that diminish you, and environments that silence you because internally you've convinced yourself that's all you deserve. But when your inner dialogue is rooted in self-worth, you choose differently. You choose boldly. You choose with vision instead of fear. Many people think destiny is shaped by outside circumstances, opportunities, timing, luck, or the actions of others. But destiny is shaped internally long before it materializes externally. It begins in the decisions you make daily. It begins in the beliefs you feed. It begins in the stories you repeat to yourself. If you constantly tell yourself that life is against you, you'll walk with resentment. If you constantly tell yourself that you are overlooked, you'll move like someone who expects rejection. If you constantly tell yourself you are unqualified, you will step back when life is calling you to step forward. Your inner dialogue becomes a prophecy. Your words to yourself become instructions for your behavior, and your behavior shapes your outcomes. You cannot walk into a future you don't believe you deserve. You cannot rise to a calling you've convinced yourself you're unprepared for. You cannot embrace opportunities when your inner voice tells you to fear them. Changing your destiny begins with changing the way you speak to yourself. Some of the most powerful transformations happen not when your circumstances change, but when your internal narrative changes. When you stop repeating the negative words spoken over you in childhood. When you stop accepting the doubts planted in you by people who never believed in themselves. When you stop carrying the weight of old failures as though they define your entire story. When you begin rewriting the script in your own mind. When you start feeding yourself words that empower, uplift, fuel, and strengthen you. Your inner dialogue is the foundation of your resilience. It decides whether you rise after you fall or stay down because you believe you can't get back up. It decides whether a setback becomes a lesson or a life sentence. It decides whether criticism becomes your destruction or your motivation. Protecting that inner voice is one of the most important things you can do, because everything you build externally will eventually crumble if the foundation within is cracked. The world will give you plenty of opinions, plenty of doubts, plenty of noise, but your destiny is not determined by their voices. It is determined by the one voice you hear the most frequently, the one inside you. When that voice becomes your place of strength instead of your place of sabotage, everything around you begins to shift.